genetically modified organisms, GMOs for short. Opponents say they are unnatural and unhealthy.
Big agriculture spent decades making sure you'd never hear about these frontier vegetables, not because they're dangerous, but because they're too resilient. These crops survive droughts, freezes, and pests that would destroy modern GMOs in days. But here's what they don't want you discovering about why these powerhouse plants disappeared from American farms. Let's dig into the vegetables that built the West. When pioneers crossed the plains in covered wagons, they couldn't stop at grocery stores. They needed vegetables that could survive in a trunk for months, then grow in terrible soil with minimal water. Enter the cowpea, the indestructible legume that fed the frontier. Cowpeas weren't just tough, they were agricultural superheroes. These beans could grow in soil so poor that modern crops would die within weeks. Drought conditions that killed corn? Cowpeas laughed and kept producing. Heat that wilted tomatoes? Cowpeas thrived in temperatures over 100 degrees. Here's what made big agriculture nervous. Cowpeas didn't need fertilizer. They actually improved soil by fixing nitrogen from the air. Plant them once, and your soil got better instead of depleted. That's terrible news for companies selling chemical fertilizers. The protein content put modern beans to shame. Pioneers could survive on cowpeas and cornmeal alone for months. We're talking complete nutrition from two simple crops. No expensive supplements, no complicated meal planning. Just food that actually sustained human life. Frontier families would plant cowpeas between corn rows. The beans climbed the corn stalks, maximizing space while improving soil. This companion planting was genius-level agriculture that modern monoculture farming completely abandoned. Then there's the versatility factor. Young pods could be eaten like green beans, mature seeds dried for winter storage. Even the leaves were edible and nutritious. One plant, multiple food sources, zero waste. Compare that to modern vegetables bred for single-use convenience. But cowpeas had one fatal flaw in agriculture's eyes. They were too easy to save and replant. Farmers didn't need to buy new seeds every year. They'd save seeds from their harvest and plant them next season. No annual seed purchases meant no recurring revenue for seed companies. The taste was another problem for industrial farming. Cowpeas had strong, distinctive flavors that varied by variety. Modern agriculture wanted bland, uniform vegetables that offended nobody. Cowpeas were too interesting, too flavorful for the mass market they were building. Speaking of plants that were too good at their job, frontier farmers had another vegetable that modern agriculture wanted buried and forgotten. Salsify was the frontier's secret weapon against scurvy and malnutrition. This weird root vegetable that tastes like oysters grew in conditions that would make modern carrots give up entirely. But big agriculture saw a problem with a vegetable that took care of itself too well. The growing time was Salsify's crime against modern farming. 8 to 9 months from seed to harvest meant you couldn't rush it. Industrial agriculture wanted crops that grew fast, harvested faster, and shipped immediately. Salsify required patience, something factory farms eliminated from their vocabulary, but here's what pioneers knew that we forgot. Salsify could stay in the ground all winter. You didn't need root cellars or preservation methods, just leave it in the frozen earth and dig it up when you needed it. Natural refrigeration that cost nothing and worked perfectly. The nutritional profile made modern vegetables look like they weren't even trying, loaded with inulin, a prebiotic fiber that fed beneficial gut bacteria. Pioneers had healthy digestive systems without probiotic supplements or Greek yogurt. They just ate Salsify. Frontier cooks would roast Salsify roots until they caramelized. The natural sugars created flavors that made expensive restaurant vegetables taste boring. Or they'd fry thin slices into chips that were actually nutritious instead of just fried starch. The flowers were edible too, purple blooms that could be tossed into salads or used as garnish. Pioneers wasted nothing, and Salsify rewarded that philosophy by being useful from root to flower. But modern agriculture couldn't mechanize Salsify harvesting easily. The long, delicate roots broke when pulled by machines. They required hand harvesting, which meant labor costs. Cheaper to grow uniform carrots that machines could harvest by the ton. Storage was another issue for industrial farming. Salsify didn't ship well over long distances. It needed to be sold fresh or left in the ground. The modern supply chain demanded vegetables that could survive weeks in trucks and warehouses. Salsify failed that test spectacularly. Speaking of vegetables that failed modern agriculture's tests, there was one herb that pioneers considered essential, but today's farms pretend doesn't exist. Lovage was the frontier's pharmacy and spice cabinet combined into one towering plant. While modern celery tastes like crunchy water with commitment issues, Lovage packed flavors so intense that one leaf replaced an entire bunch of celery. But that intensity was exactly why big agriculture wanted it gone. The problem with Lovage from an industrial perspective was simple. It was too effective. When one plant could season an entire family's meals for a year, suddenly you didn't need to buy multiple herbs and seasonings. Seed companies and spice merchants both lost money. Lovage is a perennial that comes back stronger every year. Plant it once and it fed your family for decades. No annual seed purchases, no replanting, no dependency on agricultural suppliers. This was agricultural independence, and that terrified companies built on farmer dependency. The medicinal properties made it even more threatening to established industries. Pioneers used Lovage for kidney problems, digestive issues, and joint pain. Modern research confirms what frontier herbalists knew. Lovage contains compounds that actually reduce inflammation at the cellular level. Every part worked overtime. Leaves for cooking, stems for soup stock, roots for medicine, seeds for digestive tea. It was like getting a complete pharmacy and grocery store from one plant. No wonder modern agriculture buried it. Frontier women would dry Lovage leaves and store them for winter. One plant provided enough dried herbs to last until spring. Compare that to buying fresh herbs weekly at modern grocery stores where half of it goes bad before you use it. The flavor was too bold for industrial food processing. Companies wanted mild, controllable flavors they could standardize. Lovage varied in intensity based on growing conditions and harvest time. This natural variation was unacceptable to an industry demanding uniformity. Growing conditions were another strike against it. Lovage thrived in partial shade and moist soil, conditions that didn't fit the full-sun monoculture model. Modern farms wanted crops that grew in identical rows under identical conditions. Lovage was too independent. Speaking of independent vegetables, pioneers had a root crop so sweet it competed with sugar, and that made powerful enemies. Skirret was medieval royalty's dessert and frontier families' natural candy. This sweet root vegetable made sugar unnecessary for many dishes. But when sugar companies were building empires, a vegetable that replaced their product couldn't be allowed to succeed. The natural sweetness came from inulin, not sucrose. This meant Skirret didn't spike blood sugar like refined sugar. Pioneers could satisfy sweet cravings without the health problems that came with processed sugar. That made Skirret dangerous to the emerging sugar industry. Growing Skirret was almost too easy. It tolerated poor soil, required minimal water, and came back year after year. Frontier families would plant a patch and have sweet roots available for generations. Free sweetness that grew itself threatened multiple industries simultaneously. The texture made it perfect for soups and stews. Unlike modern carrots that turned mushy when overcooked, Skirret maintained a pleasant bite. Pioneers would add it to everything, creating naturally sweet dishes without any added sugar. Children loved Skirret raw. Parents could give kids a sweet snack that was actually nutritious. Compare that to modern parents buying processed snacks full of corn syrup and artificial flavors. Skirret solved the healthy snack problem 150 years ago. But Skirret had a fatal flaw for modern agriculture. The roots were irregular and knobby, making them impossible to process mechanically. Industrial food processing demanded uniform vegetables that machines could handle. Skirret's natural variation made it worthless to factory farms. Cold tolerance was actually a problem for year-round agriculture. Skirret thrived in cool weather and went dormant in heat. Modern agriculture wanted crops that grew continuously in controlled environments. Seasonal vegetables didn't fit the perpetual production model. The flavor was too distinctive. Skirret tasted like itself, not like the bland, neutral vegetables that modern food processing preferred. Companies couldn't hide Skirret's flavor or use it as cheap filler. It had too much personality. Speaking of personality, there was one frontier green that had more nutritional punch than modern spinach could dream of achieving. Good King Henry sounds like royalty, but this was the working-class hero of frontier gardens. It made modern spinach look like it was barely trying. Loaded with iron, vitamin C, and nutrients that pioneers needed to survive harsh conditions. But industrial farming saw a problem with a vegetable that was too nutritious and too easy to grow. The perennial nature was strike one. Good King Henry came back every spring without replanting. Frontier families would establish a patch and harvest greens for years. No seed purchases, no annual planting, no dependency on suppliers. Agricultural independence was bad for business. The slow growth was strike two. While GMO crops could be rushed to market, Good King Henry took its time developing those nutrient-dense leaves. Patience and profit margins don't shake hands in industrial agriculture. Fast-growing, nutrient-poor crops won the economic battle. Versatility made it even more threatening. Young leaves went raw into salads. Mature leaves cooked like spinach. Young shoots tasted like asparagus. One plant replaced multiple vegetables, which meant fewer products to sell. Pioneers used it medicinally for wounds and inflammation. The leaves contained compounds that modern research is finally validating. Frontier families had effective medicine growing in their gardens while modern consumers buy expensive supplements. The flavor was stronger than modern spinach. Good King Henry had a distinctive taste that couldn't be hidden in processed foods. Industrial agriculture wanted bland vegetables that disappeared into their products. Strong flavors meant consumers might actually taste what they were eating. Harvesting required knowledge. You had to know which leaves to pick and when. Modern agriculture wanted crops that could be harvested by unskilled labor or machines. Good King Henry demanded attention and understanding, making it unsuitable for factory farming. The plant's appearance was too wild for modern aesthetics. It didn't grow in neat, uniform rows. It spread naturally, looking more like a weed than a crop. Modern consumers wanted vegetables that looked domesticated and controlled. Good King Henry looked too natural. Speaking of natural, pioneers had a protein source that made modern potatoes look nutritionally worthless. Groundnut was Native American agriculture's gift to frontier settlers. These climbing vines produced tubers with 3 times more protein than potatoes. But modern agriculture couldn't handle a vegetable that was smarter than their farming methods. The climbing habit was the first problem. Groundnut vines reached for the sky, improving soil while producing food. Modern monoculture wanted crops that stayed put in neat rows. Vertical growth complicated mechanical harvesting and didn't fit the factory model. Soil improvement was actually a disadvantage in modern agriculture's eyes. Groundnut fixed nitrogen and enhanced soil health naturally, but fertilizer companies needed farmers to buy chemicals. A crop that improved soil while growing threatened an entire industry. The protein content was almost too good. Pioneers could survive on groundnuts and corn, getting complete nutrition from 2 crops. Modern agriculture wanted consumers dependent on multiple products, supplements, and processed foods. Self-sufficiency was bad for business. Drought tolerance made groundnut nearly indestructible. While modern crops required irrigation systems and constant water, groundnut thrived in dry conditions. This resilience meant farmers didn't need expensive infrastructure. Simple farming threatened complex agricultural systems. The tubers stored naturally in the ground. Pioneers didn't need root cellars or preservation methods, just leave groundnuts in the earth and dig them up when needed. This eliminated the need for storage facilities and preservation technologies that modern agriculture sold. Taste was another complication. Groundnut had a distinctive, slightly sweet flavor that varied by variety and growing conditions. Modern food processing demanded uniform, predictable flavors. Natural variation was unacceptable to an industry built on standardization. The harvest timing required knowledge. Groundnut tubers developed over the growing season, and optimal harvest time varied by climate and conditions. Modern agriculture wanted crops that could be harvested on schedule regardless of actual readiness. Groundnut demanded attention. Speaking of attention, there was one tangy green that pioneers knew could survive winters that killed everything else. Sorrel was everywhere in frontier gardens because it refused to die. This tangy, lemon-flavored green survived freezes that would kill modern lettuce instantly, packed with more vitamin A than most vegetables in your grocery cart right now. But modern agriculture had problems with a vegetable that was too tough and too flavorful. The winter hardiness was actually a disadvantage for year-round agriculture. Sorrel thrived in cold weather when other greens failed, but modern agriculture wanted crops that grew continuously in controlled environments. Seasonal vegetables didn't fit the perpetual production model. The sour taste was too distinctive. Sorrel tasted like someone crossed lettuce with a lemon wedge. Modern consumers were being trained to accept bland, neutral flavors. Strong, distinctive tastes threatened the processed food industry that needed vegetables to be flavorless carriers for added seasonings. Natural preservation was another problem. The oxalic acid in sorrel acted as a natural preservative, keeping it fresh longer than modern greens, but this meant sorrel didn't need the chemical treatments and modified atmosphere packaging that modern agriculture sold. Natural preservation eliminated profit opportunities. Pioneers would harvest sorrel all winter long. While other vegetables were stored or preserved, sorrel grew fresh under snow. This eliminated the need for preservation technologies and winter vegetable imports. Self-sufficiency threatened supply chains. The nutritional density was too high. Sorrel delivered serious vitamin content in small servings. Modern agriculture preferred vegetables that required large quantities to meet nutritional needs. More consumption meant more sales. Growing conditions were too flexible. Sorrel thrived in sun or partial shade, wet or dry soil, good or poor conditions. This adaptability meant farmers didn't need specialized equipment, fertilizers, or irrigation. Simple success threatened complex agricultural systems. The perennial nature meant no annual seed purchases. Plant sorrel once, and it came back for years. Modern agriculture's business model depended on farmers buying seeds annually. Perennials broke that cycle. Speaking of breaking cycles, there was one massive plant that pioneers used for heart health, and modern medicine didn't want competition. Cardoon was the artichoke's bigger, tougher brother that frontier families couldn't get enough of. This towering plant could reach 6 feet tall and delivered cardiovascular benefits that made modern drugs look expensive and ineffective. But when pharmaceutical companies were building empires, a vegetable that protected hearts naturally was a serious threat. The cholesterol-lowering effects were too effective. Studies show Cardoon extract can reduce bad cholesterol by up to 30%. That's better than many prescription drugs, and it grew in frontier gardens for free. Pharmaceutical companies couldn't patent a vegetable? The fiber content was almost excessive. 1 cup delivered nearly half your daily fiber needs, which meant stable blood sugar and healthy digestion. Modern processed foods were deliberately low in fiber to increase consumption. Cardoon's natural fiber content threatened that model. Growing Cardoon required patience and skill. The plants needed careful blanching and specific conditions. Modern agriculture wanted crops that grew with minimal knowledge or attention. Skilled farming didn't fit the unskilled labor model that industrial agriculture demanded. The Mediterranean diet crowd still swears by Cardoon for good reason. While modern vegetables are bred for shelf life and appearance, Cardoon delivers actual nutrition that affects health. Real food threatened the supplement industry. Harvest timing was critical. Cardoon stalks needed to be blanched by wrapping or hilling soil around them. This labor-intensive process couldn't be mechanized easily. Modern agriculture wanted crops that machines could harvest without special treatment. The size was problematic for modern packaging. Cardoon stalks were large and irregular, making them impossible to package in standard containers. Industrial food distribution demanded uniform sizes that fit standardized packaging. Cardoon was too big and too variable. Cooking knowledge was required. You couldn't just eat Cardoon raw or steam it quickly. It needed proper preparation to be palatable. Modern consumers wanted vegetables that required zero knowledge or skill. Cardoon demanded both. Speaking of demanding attention, there was one delicate green that appeared in fairy tales because people were obsessed with its flavor. Rampion was so charming it landed in Rapunzel's origin story. This delicate green with slightly sweet leaves ruled frontier salad bowls before big agriculture decided we didn't need interesting flavors anymore. But Rampion's real crime was being too nutritious and too easy to grow. The magnesium content was exceptional. Rampion delivered more magnesium than most modern vegetables, supporting bone health naturally. But supplement companies needed consumers to buy magnesium pills. A vegetable that provided it naturally threatened that revenue stream. The mild, sweet flavor was too interesting. Rampion tasted like the gentlest radish you've ever had, with subtle complexity that made salads actually enjoyable. Modern agriculture wanted bland lettuce that tasted like crunchy water. Flavor was a complication. Pest resistance was almost too good. Rampion shrugged off problems that destroyed modern crops. While lettuce required pesticides and constant monitoring, Rampion just grew. This natural resilience eliminated the need for chemical treatments that agricultural companies sold. The biennial nature complicated modern farming. Rampion grew leaves the first year and flowered the second. Modern agriculture wanted annual crops that completed their cycle in one season. 2-year crops didn't fit production schedules. Frontier families would let some Rampion plants flower and self-seed. This created a perpetual supply without replanting. Modern agriculture needed farmers to buy seeds every year. Self-seeding vegetables broke the dependency cycle. The roots were edible too. Rampion produced small, radish-like roots that could be eaten raw or cooked. One plant, multiple food sources. Modern agriculture preferred single-purpose vegetables that forced consumers to buy multiple products. Growing conditions were too flexible. Rampion tolerated various soils and conditions, making it accessible to frontier families with poor land. Modern agriculture wanted crops that required specific, expensive inputs. Easy success threatened the input supply industry. Speaking of multiple uses, Romans had a vegetable that did everything, and that versatility made it dangerous to specialized agriculture. Alexander's was the Roman Empire's celery on steroids, and frontier settlers who knew about it had a massive advantage. Every part was edible: roots, stems, leaves, and seeds. This complete utility threatened an agricultural system built on selling specialized products. The medicinal compounds were too effective. Alexander's contained astragalene and other substances that frontier herbalists used for stomach troubles and joint pain. Modern pharmaceutical companies couldn't compete with free medicine growing in gardens. The peppery flavor was too bold. Alexander's tasted like celery decided to develop personality and confidence. Modern food processing wanted mild vegetables that disappeared into products. Strong flavors meant consumers might actually taste what they were eating. Harvest complexity was the real problem. Each part of Alexander's needed different timing and techniques. Roots in fall, stems in spring, leaves throughout the season, seeds in summer. Modern agriculture wanted single harvest crops that machines could process. Multiple harvests required knowledge and attention. The perennial nature eliminated annual seed sales. Alexander's came back every year, providing food without replanting. Modern agriculture's business model depended on annual seed purchases. Perennials broke that profitable cycle. Frontier families who grew Alexander's had a year-round food source. Different parts were available in different seasons, providing continuous nutrition. Modern agriculture wanted consumers dependent on year-round imports and preserved foods. Self-sufficiency threatened supply chains. The strong flavor meant you couldn't hide it in processed foods. Alexander's tasted like itself, not like the neutral vegetables that industrial food processing preferred. Companies needed bland ingredients they could flavor artificially. Natural flavor was a complication. Growing conditions were too adaptable. Alexander's thrived in various soils and climates, making it accessible to frontier families across different regions. Modern agriculture wanted crops that required specific conditions and inputs. Universal success threatened specialized product sales. Speaking of adaptability, there was one blue-flowered plant that lifted spirits naturally and that threatened an emerging pharmaceutical industry. Borage was called the herb of gladness because frontier folks swore it could lift anyone's mood faster than a surprise gold strike. Those blue star-shaped flowers weren't just pretty. They contained gamma-linolenic acid that supported adrenal health better than modern stress supplements. But natural mood enhancement threatened industries built on treating depression. The edible flowers were too beautiful. Toss them on salads, and suddenly your meal looked like something from a fancy restaurant. Modern agriculture wanted vegetables that looked industrial and uniform. Natural beauty was a complication. The self-seeding habit was problematic for seed sales. Borage dropped seeds that grew into new plants the next year. Frontier families would plant it once and have borage forever. Modern agriculture needed annual seed purchases. Self-perpetuating plants broke the business model. The alkaloid content became an excuse for restriction. Some places limited borage because of pyrrolizidine alkaloids, but coffee has alkaloids too, and nobody's banning morning coffee. The difference was borage actually helped adrenal glands instead of stressing them. Bee attraction was too effective. Plant borage, and you'd have the happiest pollinators in the territory, but modern agriculture was moving toward crops that didn't need pollinators or use controlled pollination. Natural pollinator attraction complicated industrial farming. The gamma-linolenic acid content was too valuable. This fatty acid supported healthy inflammation response better than many modern supplements, but supplement companies needed consumers to buy expensive pills. A plant that provided it naturally threatened profits. Frontier herbalists used borage for everything from calming nerves to treating melancholy. Modern research validates their wisdom, but pharmaceutical companies couldn't patent traditional knowledge. Natural remedies threatened prescription drug sales. The flavor was too distinctive. Borage tasted like cucumber with hints of honey. Modern agriculture wanted neutral flavors they could control and standardize. Natural, complex flavors didn't fit the processed food model. Speaking of complex, there was one plant that provided both food and medicine, and that dual purpose made it too valuable to allow. Mallow was the original marshmallow plant, and frontier families used every part of it. The roots made actual marshmallows before companies replaced them with sugar and gelatin. But a plant that provided both food and medicine threatened multiple industries simultaneously. The mucilage content was too useful. Mallow created a natural coating that soothed sore throats and stomach ulcers. Frontier families had effective medicine without buying expensive remedies. Natural healing threatened pharmaceutical sales. The invasive growth was actually a feature for pioneers. Mallow spread easily and grew in poor conditions. One plant became many without effort. But modern agriculture saw this as a problem. Crops that spread themselves eliminated seed sales. The leaves were edible and nutritious. Pioneers tossed them into stews and soups, creating dishes that healed while they fed. Modern agriculture wanted to separate food from medicine. Mallow's dual purpose complicated that division. The flowers were beautiful and edible. Purple blooms that could garnish salads or be eaten directly. Modern agriculture wanted vegetables that looked like vegetables, not ornamental plants. Beauty was a complication for industrial farming. Frontier healers used mallow roots to make poultices for burns and wounds. The mucilage created a protective coating that promoted healing. Modern medicine couldn't patent traditional remedies, so natural healing threatened pharmaceutical profits. The resilience was too extreme. Mallow grew when everything else failed, providing food during droughts and hard times. Modern agriculture wanted crops that required inputs and support. Self-sufficient plants threatened the input supply industry. Storage was impossible for industrial distribution. Mallow needed to be used fresh or left in the ground. It didn't ship well or last in warehouses. The modern supply chain demanded vegetables that survived weeks of transport. Mallow failed that test. Speaking of failing modern tests, there was one coastal vegetable that thrived in conditions that killed everything else. Sea kale was the frontier coast treasure that laughed at salt spray and harsh winds. While inland farmers babied their vegetables, coastal settlers just let sea kale do its thing. But this maritime marvel's independence was exactly why modern agriculture wanted it forgotten. The salt tolerance was too good. Sea kale thrived in salty soil. that killed modern crops instantly. This meant coastal land that agriculture companies considered worthless could actually produce food. Productive wasteland threatened land development schemes. The vitamin C content prevented scurvy better than supplements. Frontier sailors and coastal families stayed healthy eating sea kale. Modern supplement companies needed consumers to buy vitamin C pills. Natural sources threatened that market. The soil improvement was problematic for chemical companies. Sea kale prevented erosion and actually enhanced coastal soil. Modern agriculture wanted farmers dependent on fertilizers and soil amendments. Plants that improved soil naturally eliminated those sales. The flavor was too refined. Sea kale tasted like the best parts of asparagus and spinach combined, with a natural saltiness from growing near the ocean. Modern agriculture wanted bland vegetables. Distinctive flavors complicated processed food production. The niche growing conditions limited industrial production. Sea kale needed coastal environments and specific conditions. Modern agriculture wanted crops that grew anywhere under controlled conditions. Regional specialization didn't fit the global distribution model. Harvest timing required knowledge. Sea kale needed to be blanched by covering shoots as they emerged. This labor-intensive process couldn't be mechanized. Modern agriculture wanted crops that machines could harvest without special treatment. The perennial nature eliminated annual seed sales. Sea kale came back every year, providing food without replanting. Modern agriculture's business model depended on farmers buying seeds annually. Perennials broke that profitable cycle. Speaking of breaking cycles, there was one beautiful pod that was too interesting for modern agriculture's boring standards. Asparagus pea looked like it belonged in a fancy restaurant, but grew like a weed in frontier gardens. Those winged pods with bright red flowers were almost too pretty to eat. But beauty and ease of growing made this legume dangerous to an industry built on difficulty and dependence. The nitrogen-fixing ability was too beneficial. Asparagus peas improved soil while producing food. Modern agriculture wanted farmers buying fertilizers. Plants that enhanced soil naturally threatened chemical sales. The irregular shape was problematic for processing. Those beautiful winged pods didn't fit into standardized packaging or processing equipment. Modern agriculture demanded uniform vegetables that machines could handle. Natural variation was unacceptable. The short harvest window required attention. Asparagus peas needed to be picked at exactly the right moment. Too early, and they were bland. Too late, and they were tough. Modern agriculture wanted crops that could be harvested on schedule regardless of actual readiness. The flavor was too distinctive. Asparagus peas tasted like their name suggested, similar to asparagus but with a unique character. Modern food processing wanted neutral vegetables. Strong flavors meant consumers might actually taste what they were eating. The ornamental appearance was a complication. Those red flowers and winged pods looked decorative, not agricultural. Modern consumers were trained to expect vegetables that looked industrial and uniform. Beauty suggested inefficiency. The climbing habit complicated mechanical farming. Asparagus peas grew vertically, requiring support structures. Modern agriculture wanted crops that stayed in neat rows on the ground. Vertical growth didn't fit the mechanized harvest model. The folate content was too high. Asparagus peas delivered serious nutrition in small servings. Modern agriculture preferred vegetables that required large quantities to meet nutritional needs. More consumption meant more sales. Speaking of consumption, there was one weed that provided more nutrition than expensive vegetables, and that made it dangerous to the entire agricultural industry. Chickweed grows faster than gossip at a frontier trading post. Within weeks, you can harvest tender leaves that pack more vitamin C than oranges. But modern agriculture convinced everyone this nutritional powerhouse was a worthless pest. Meanwhile, they pushed uniform crops that deliver about as much nutrition as cardboard. The speed of growth was too efficient. Chickweed went from seed to harvest in weeks. Modern agriculture wanted crops that required long growing seasons and multiple inputs. Fast, easy success threatened the complexity that generated profits. The universal growing conditions were problematic. Chickweed thrived everywhere. Poor soil, drought, shade, sun. Modern agriculture wanted crops that required specific, expensive conditions. Universal adaptability eliminated the need for specialized inputs. The saponin content provided natural anti-inflammatory benefits. Frontier families made poultices from chickweed to treat wounds and skin problems. Modern pharmaceutical companies couldn't compete with free medicine growing in every yard. The impossibility of control was the real issue. You can't patent a weed that grows wild everywhere. There's no money in telling people they can harvest free salad greens from their lawn. Chickweed's abundance threatened the entire concept of agricultural scarcity. The mild flavor was too accessible. Chickweed tasted like a cross between spinach and corn silk, mild enough that even picky eaters accepted it. Modern agriculture wanted vegetables that required acquired tastes or heavy seasoning. Natural palatability was a complication. The sustainability was almost offensive to industrial farming. While GMO crops required fertilizers, pesticides, and constant intervention, chickweed just grew. It was nature saying, "I've got this covered." Self-sufficient plants threatened dependent farming systems. The free availability was the ultimate crime. Chickweed grew in every frontier yard, every field, every disturbed soil. Pioneers had unlimited free vegetables without buying seeds or plants. Modern agriculture's entire business model depended on scarcity and purchase requirements. Abundance was the enemy. So there you have it, 15 vegetables that didn't just feed the frontier, they represented self-sufficiency, resilience, and nutrition without corporate permission. They weren't buried because they were dangerous, but because they were too good at keeping people healthy without making anyone rich. Makes you wonder what else we've traded away in the name of progress, doesn't it?